All right. Welcome, Andrew. We have Andrew here with Use Poseidon, a really innovative marketing firm out here focused in RIAs in the wealth management space. So, Andrew, kind of just start us off a little bit about, who you are, how you got to Poseidon, what you guys are doing, and then how you're really changing the game in the wealth management space, right? With it being an industry that's been around for ages, right? But things are really changing now with all the technology. So talk us a little bit about that.
And we'll start with your first question. So, Christian, thanks for having me on the show. I think uh the best way to describe it, I would say, is just having the presence of mind to see opportunity. So, I spent 15 years inside VC-backed startups, first in TV entertainment, and then again in HR tech, selling SaaS, where I had a chance to work with some truly heavy hitters in the space. Folks like Mark Roberge over at HubSpot, or at least in his former HubSpot days, Mike Volpe, who is the CMO there. Megan Eisenberg, who's done some really cool things with publicly traded entities. So, just got into the practice of scaling fast and raising money and burning money and two exits and all of it. So I've lived the life where headcount goes up, and sometimes the efficiency graph doesn't always follow the same way. Um, but then, when I stopped to figure out the next step of my journey, I met the founder of Poseidon, and we really hit it off. So at the time, we were doing a lot of research, deep market research, I would say, and Poseidon was really born out of necessity. We needed a way to sell to enterprises. We needed to sell to a lot of different organizations. And that led us to working with folks like Amazon and so forth. But I think the key was we really found our stride with an RIA client that happens to be now the fastest RIA growing in existence. And I think
Wow.
some of you can probably name that firm. And I think what's interesting is what wealth management firms have in common with the VC-backed sort of software marketing space, which is we tend to add advisors, we tend to add staff and software in ways that don't always add leverage. So we took a lot of what was important about Poseidon and driving client acquisition, and we started to systematize that, which I think will be what we chat about today.
Okay. Awesome. So I mean, with that, what is your core role like with Poseidon, right? How do you define that and how do you integrate that with, your vision and the vision for the company, moving forward as far as the metrics that you track, right? Like you said, adding headcount isn't always adding efficiency. So where do you find that balance when you're kind of coming in and expanding the brand?
Okay, so let's break that into a few different questions. Well, my role as the as a COO is really to look after the operations. That's on the surface, but more than that, I think we've got to design leverage. And I don't know what the future holds now that we're solidly in the age of AI, but I'm very confident about one thing, which is I think companies with an AI native sort of operating system, they're going to outperform companies that have more human heavy operating systems. And you can see this very clearly in different organizations when you kind of get a feel for, okay, how do they actually do things? There's a great
Hmm.
saying, which is like how we do one thing is kind of how we do everything, or how
Yeah.
someone does one thing. And I think that's a very interesting way to look at it. So we take that bias very seriously. And so my vision is a company that stays intentionally very small, but moves intentionally very quickly. And I
Hmm.
think in so doing, we can keep what I might call senior judgment at the center, while a lot of other things get automated versus being either outsourced or hired for. So, for example, headcount is pretty much our last resort,
Hmm.
right? And I think that's a very polarizing statement, but I think that's something we need to live by if we're going to carry out this vision. Complexity, just as it could be people, process, technology. Complexity is going to be the enemy in many cases. is going to be the impediment to moving as quickly as you can. And then we'll talk about this a little bit later too, which is trust. As more things get commoditized by AI, I happen to share this view. Trust is going to be a big source of currency for just about any firm in the market right now.
Sure, sure. And especially, yeah, like you said, trust with you never even know what to trust, right? So the relationship part of it is still going to be kind of on that foundation. And to your point about complexity, right? The old adage is KISS, right? Keep it simple, stupid. And if you have the technologies on the foundation, but you've built that intentionally, it allows you to scale in a way where, like you said, headcount is kind of the last resort because you built the foundation, right? So when technology kind of improves on that, it'll just improve itself over time.
We have a saying around here that we need more adventurers and not
Hmm.
scholars. So if we are going to hire, we want those adventurers. And what I mean by that is I think very quickly what's happening is people who have been trained to do a certain thing, and you need scholars, right? You need to have medical professionals. I'd rather have an MD operating on me than AI right now.
Yeah.
I'm sure someday that doctors will become heavily AI assisted, but for now, um, in marketing, it's a thing where the pace of making mistakes and the pace of learning is so much more important than um, in other fields where getting it right is obviously paramount. Like you can't send people into space thinking, oh, we can get this, we can just take a quick stab at this and see if there's something here. You got to get it right and think through
Yeah.
all the outcomes. And I think that's something that perhaps wealth firms, the folks that we serve, um, I'd like to inspire them to and take them down that journey by the hand, and I think it's a very refreshing feeling when they realize, oh, I can do this. I can
Sure.
scale my audience, and I can get clients from it.
Sure. So I guess what's kind of parlaying into that, what's kind of the biggest thing that when you work with clients, they do discover working with you, right? As far as when it comes to, especially an industry that is kind of old school in the sense that relationship based, one-on-one, in person, how do you help them make that transition to now having more of those workflows in place rather than just manually doing everything?
Okay, so we're going to the how. Um, well, the problem we really had to think very carefully about is most firms and most advisors, if you're running a solo practice or you're thinking about your own book growth, they tend to scale the wrong thing. It's not an error of execution, it's an error of intent. They're trying to scale either effort, like I need to just get out there more, I need to spend more time doing this, and that translates to more hours. Or the firm might scale more people. Let's add some marketers to this and then kind of sprinkle some marketing on it, and things are going to happen. And yeah, to a certain degree, that does work, especially in the early days, but none of that really scales trust, which is ultimately what advisors need to sell.
Hmm.
I wrote a post recently about how many advisors don't actually want an audience at first. They just want the AUM, and I totally understand that. When you're early, you gotta make sales and get clients in whatever way you can. And I think the same was true for for example, my LinkedIn profile early on when I was selling into HR tech. Yeah, you just had to get after it. But I think once you reach a certain level of traction, if you're on LinkedIn or if you're building a following on Instagram or wherever it might be, if you have an email newsletter, you have to switch from getting clients to earning an audience.
Hmm.
And that shift is something that we've helped a lot of advisors engineer into their own practices. So, what does that shift mean? It's not a product, it's a decision. It's helping them with a decision that everything that can be put onto either something that is AI based or something workflow based or something very work based oriented will be, or everything that requires your judgment as the advisor, the human judgment, stays very, very well protected. And that's
Hmm.
what our system and what our customers do, and it's why they look the way they do when they do outbound prospecting. That's built almost as an infrastructure that is always humming, almost like an appliance. content is built from extracting knowledge and um, individuality. That's a very important word in this field, I think, and not it doesn't
Sure.
leave so much up to the creativity of the advisor. Um, and research that's done in a way that adapts messaging to clients very, very quickly, as opposed to things that don't coordinate so well or require humans um, to coordinate those things. And I don't think this is really an agency model. It's not necessarily lead gen. What we like to say is more engineering led go to market. It's doing a lot of the thing, gotta do a lot of little things very well to go to market successfully. But if it's all on you and you're an advisor and you have a day job, you're
Hmm.
gonna have to take advantage of today's technology to make this happen.
Sure. And I guess another question is in like an industry that's so heavily regulated, right? Especially for the advisors, what they can and can't say, and so on and so forth, balanced with the point that you do need individuality. How do the systems kind of balance all that, right? Well, not saying too much, but not saying not enough, and still kind of giving a personal opinion or a personal take without crossing any of those lines. It's kind of like a labyrinth, right? I mean, there's a lot of things to take into consideration there, especially at scale.
Well, I think we can choose to wallow in that. This is the first thing I would say is you can choose to wallow in that, or we can learn how to or decide to pick
Hmm.
ourselves up out of that. And I think that's a very important distinction and decision that practices and advisors need to make. So that's the first thing. The second tricky thing is, okay, how do I sell peace of mind to a client without offering peace of mind?
Hmm.
In wealth management, trust is everything, but I also think it's the least systematized in the business. And I wrote a post recently on, well, what are those things that you can offer people? A lot. You can offer a great deal, right? And it might be knowledge based. An advisor, client of ours, he's a former quant trader. Used to be on the floor, literally trading, and so he carries an extra level of, I would say, expertise than someone who may have come at it from client services, or maybe they came at it from a world where they previously used to sell insurance products or what have you. There's quite a lot that you can offer. So I think it's really important for the advisor and the practice to be honest with yourself. Well, what can I bring to the table? Who can I connect with based on that? We all want high net worth individuals, but you got to start with, okay, who do I actually want to connect with? I think a lot of advisory practices who start out on this journey, they may not have the right intentions when they come into it, which is, okay, if I want to benefit from something like social media marketing, or if I want to benefit from cutting edge prospecting systems, it can't just be smile and dial, spray and pray. It has to be
Hmm.
very high fidelity, but maybe low to medium volume outreach to prospects. But the key is don't just come in here barging in selling. You've got to connect with people, and I think it can't be about how smart you are. It's got to be about how well do you understand people, and that you can easily demonstrate without going over compliance barriers or upsetting the certain individuals in your organization.
Sure. Sure. That's really cool. And then, I guess, for your end, like systems wise, right? Again, back to that foundation and that tech base. Is there specific systems or processes that you guys implement, right, to stay so lean, right, and kind of have that infrastructure that allows you to have more efficiency, still grow, not have to increase that headcount, and that maybe some other people that are listening to this could learn from and kind of internalize into their own landscape.
Yeah, so a lot of our activity, you'll see a lot of our advisors on LinkedIn. And you probably noticed that the number of talking heads on LinkedIn has increased a lot. And there's a reason for that. It's because it works. So that's the
Mhm.
first thing. So how do you build a system, a very simple system around that? Showing up on camera because, picture's worth a thousand words. And if you have, a video doing this, then you can communicate a lot with a prospective client. So that's the first thing, is how do you extract the advisor's real expertise? People, advisors, managing partners, they tend to speak better than they write. Um, and so we extract that insight through interviews just like this. I'm sure you're going to cut this interview up and use it to drive your business as well. And I think that's a smart idea. It's not going to be about templates or content calendars. It's surfacing the actual thinking that an advisor is doing that clients might be thinking but can't verbalize yet. Okay.
Sure.
Step two, how do you turn that insight into familiarity? And you might hear this referred to as content atomization or redistribution. For those of you watching, go read Ross Simmons' book. I think it's called Create Once, Distribute Forever. It's most, if you have a marketing organization or an agency working with you, is we tend to do things kind of upside down. A lot of practices, they spend 80% of their time making content, but only a tiny little 20% distributing the content. It should be flipped entirely around. Spend 20% of the time that you have for marketing on creating content, and then the other 80% distributing, and you will find it's much, much, much more fruitful. So we talk a lot about that. People trust what feels recognizable. So how do you become recognizable? It's going to be about frequency. Content
Hmm.
isn't educational or 100% educational, but it's got to be relatable, identity driven, and in ways that people see themselves, and that you're teaching people about themselves.
Yeah. Yeah. And the more they see you, the more they get familiar, right? That whole
You
know,
gotta
like, and
shake
trust
enough
adage.
atoms in the universe. I can't believe I'm doing this right now. Is you gotta shake enough atoms in the universe to make things happen and have the primordial soup of biology work its magic for
Yeah.
life to be created.
Awesome. Yeah, that's really cool. So I guess what are you guys working on at Poseidon right now? Like, is there anything? I know it's, we're going into the new year, right? In just a few moments here. Is there anything exciting that you guys are working on to both finish off this year and also going into next year, like your next venture? What's kind of going on with you guys at this point?
I would say in a word, it's distribution. Distribution of knowledge, expertise. That I think that's the first level of thinking. But when you think about a lot of different fields, especially art, there are certain people who become very successful in whatever field it might be. It could be art, music, movie making, things like that. And then what happens is once somebody hits it big, everybody imitates it. And
Mm,
then the entire industry kind of becomes commoditized around that style of delivery or doing things. Um, but I think that's rather unhealthy in the long run. And it becomes a bit of a disease where once everybody starts doing it, starts to not work so well anymore. And people spend their careers thinking about, well, what am I doing this in the first place for when you're actually being honest with yourself? So, distribution, I think, also applies to individuality. What are the shared worldviews that an advisor might have with a prospective client that ends up driving trust in the first place? When we look empirically at what actually drives a client's book of business and why people are successful with a certain advisor
perfect.
is is then what happens to the relationship? It continues, and that becomes a very fruitful relationship for the advisor and the practice over time. Well, that all maps back to distribution of worldviews.
Yeah.
We all, I mean, every single news channel on television, there are hundreds of them. They're all reporting on pretty much the same things that are happening in the world, but they all have a
Yeah.
different viewpoint, and it comes down to who does your client trust?
Hmm.
And understandably, the industry, well, understandably, clients, the typical client, someone who has assets and encounters financial decisions and financial questions, they don't trust this industry very much for good
Hmm.
reason because they don't have a way to really verify. Compliance says you cannot promise results. Compliance says you cannot, to a certain degree, say, I can do similar things for you. Now that's loosened up a little bit with
Hmm.
I think FINRA and certain regulations saying, oh, okay, you can put testimonials on your website, but how realistically are clients supposed to trust you?
Yeah.
So they come in not trusting you,
Yeah.
understandably. So you gotta find a way to get over that. And I think that comes down to a lot of digging deep. But then, like a lot of things, everybody wants the medicine until the medicine is, well, disciplined, repetitive things that might be kind of boring at times and might feel like they're not working. It's a little bit like diet and exercise, right?
Hmm.
Doctors, most modern ailments are solved by consistent diet and exercise, which is nobody wants to hear. Right?
Yeah. They want
Everybody's
the
listening in trying to hear
fast.
that, hear that. But I think where then a company like ours and just where we found some pockets of inspiration is, well, you can leave a lot of that disciplined activity up to people whose day job it is to do that. You have
Hmm.
a very important day job as advisors of practice serving your clients. That's like number one is your clients. But then, man, for the price of hiring a marketer who understands this, who cares about this as much as you do, and understands your expertise as much as you do, um, I think that business model is coming into question for a lot of our clients, and is why we built the business around this.
Wow. That's awesome. That's awesome. So then moving in to the new year, what are your plans for expansion? Is there anything new that you're working on, or are there any bottlenecks that you're trying to hump over before the new year? Kind of what's in queue for Poseidon?
I'm pretty open about this. We're not here to build a big team. We want to build the kind of company that we want to
Hmm.
run. And I think that comes with some significant and at times, in my social circles, embarrassing trade-offs. The biggest bottleneck to your question, especially as a bootstrap company, is scaling your judgment. And it's not going to be about task, output and um, adding analysts and operations people and more marketers. It's how do we multiply the quality of our thinking? And
Hmm.
this happens to a lot of advisory firms when, say a budding practice that was solo at first, you start having client relations and functions like that. The quality of thinking, by definition, it tends to dilute unless you are uh, world class at hiring.
Hmm.
So how you address it has to be, I think, rooted in your beliefs, which is what we're trying to do, playing the game on hard mode, so to speak. So we embrace
Yeah.
those constraints. I think there's a great chef that I really admire. His name is Magnus Nielsen. He closed his, award-winning restaurant some time ago, but he's published and done a lot on Netflix and so forth. But he comes out and says, "Hey, constraints, they tend to force creativity," and I think
Hmm.
constraints can be a very good thing. So, how do you turn intuition into very documented systems, and how can you tighten process so that you can reduce, the variance that you might see in client relationships um, and their perceptions? How can you help AI carry things that historically carry a lot of cognitive load? Um,
Sure.
and so that when you have very simple workflows, it's not necessarily a human and process driven thing. It's a process and technology question. And I think in a way, so far in this journey, and we've been doing this for a few years, is
Hmm.
I think the irony is that these constraints end up becoming somewhat of an unfair advantage if you give it long enough.
Hmm.
And I think larger teams, and I've been part of many large teams before, if you have a big budget, you can outrun the problems for a while,
Yeah. Yeah.
but eventually the weight catches up with you, just the extra baggage, whether it's people, process, or technology. And I think that's what we're trying to think about next. How do you help
Hmm.
advisors own their audience in ways that are adapted to what the best marketers, the best influencers are doing today, and that's moving very, 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 very quickly. But it still comes down to distribution.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean that kind of parlays into one of my couple final questions here. You know, the merge of that, right? These RIAs and online authority. Again, you know, how you're specifically helping these RIAs, you know, with their social media, like with their output, with their distribution, right? How does that kind of parlay into the next generation and moving forward, you know, with attracting again, because especially with like the silver tsunami, right? And that whole new generation, how do you see that being like the perfect solution to ultimately what's going to be needed moving forward?
Well, a couple of things. I posted on this recently, which is most advisors are very content with um, just clients, and especially if they're high net worth. But I don't think that's sufficient anymore. You've got to
Hmm.
verticalize.
Hmm.
And one of the reasons for that, and this just came out this year, there's a research data point that, okay, if you want, more premium multiples for your book, your practice, it tends to be when the acquirer knows you have mostly doctors, or knows you have mostly people in a certain stage of life or who have a
Hmm.
certain problem. If you're a generalized practice, then that acquirer doesn't have that on their on the table, um, for how they're underwriting the practice. Um, and what that means is acquirers are looking at this as a generalized. If a generalized practice is growing just by default, sort of, it's because of macro forces. It's not because they've got an organic plan in place and they're tracking very well to that plan. I was sitting with it was a roundtable webinar with a former CEO of a Hightower Group. And he's like, look, one of the first things we look at a book or a practice is, yeah, what's your organic marketing plan? What's your organic growth plan, I should say?
Hmm.
And if they don't have one, that's one thing, okay? It's
Hmm.
another thing if they have a plan and they're not tracking to it. And it's another thing entirely if they have a plan and they are tracking well to it. That means, I mean, just like any of the exit planning advisors we speak to, you got to be able to operate this thing, or an acquirer has to be able to operate this thing and grow it without you there.
Yeah, exactly.
So I think or we feel highly convicted that it really revolves around more owned distribution. And it could be YouTube, it could be
Hmm.
LinkedIn, it could be social media, things of that nature. It could be something else. I don't know what the next 5 years are going to hold. But when we
Hmm.
look at things like wealth concentration over time, I mean, say what you will about geopolitics and so forth, um, we're not we're considering that data point, K-shaped economy and things of that nature. But I think many wealth advisors who continue to serve high net worth individuals, it's worth looking at that. Well, how if wealth is to concentrate, how am I going to be in those circles where high net worth individuals are speaking about me freely, in places that I can't always track? You know, a lot of the most trusted, when it comes back to trust here, engineering trust,
Yeah.
is how does that trust get passed around? It's not going to be on an ad. It's not going to be, it might be to a certain degree on social media, but it's happening in text messages. It's happening in, hey, I have this problem. Who do I saw that you like this post by a financial advisor. Oh, yeah, I work with that person. They're good.
Hmm.
No, HubSpot's not going to be pick that up. Your CRM's not
Yeah.
going to be pick that up.
Yeah.
And most likely the client's not willing to give that information up. They're just say, oh yeah, I think I recommended you at some point. Right.
Hmm.
So dark social, I think Chris Walker from Marketing Circles, he kind of coined this term earlier this decade. I think is something that we all have to take advantage of, whether we agree with it or not. And I think those who kind of get ahead of that now, building trust um, in that wealth concentrated world, um, they're going to be well served in the next 5 to 10 years.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, you know, the old relying on referrals is, I guess, amplified with this, right? Because again, if your brand is out there, I mean, technically it's the same thing. You're being referred to by all your videos, your content that lives forever, your comments, right? All of that. And that's the part of surviving without you,
Think of it
right?
this way. If you're an advisor, or if you're me, or you Christian, someone looks you up because someone referred you, it's actually not the kind of referral stream you need to own. You actually need to own that first page of Google. Why?
Hmm.
Because when someone says, "Hey, you should check out my guy Christian. He helps me with taxes and finances." What's the first thing someone's going to do? They're going to go into their phone and Google that person. Well, if that Google search result is a wasteland and all you see is maybe like a Yelp review, then the person who got referred is going to say, "Whoa, that's okay. Well, that's nice of that person. I'm going to have to take a lot more on faith, or I start asking some more questions."
Hmm.
Flip that around. Let's say you, Christian, have a ton of great videos, a ton of great educational content. Oh, you've written some blog posts about, okay, here's some of the early questions that people have when they enter or have never had a financial advisor. Then they feel a lot more welcomed by that. You pass that Google sort of gut check. Then the next thing,
Sure.
what are people going to do? They're going to look at, okay, well, let's check out this person out on social. Why? Because tomorrow's affluent business owners and affluent people, they're all growing up on social media right now. They're not going to Google. They're used to
Yep.
capturing all their information from their social feed. So if you're not showing up there, and the last LinkedIn you post you've had was congratulations on someone's job transition 5 years ago,
Yeah.
oh, okay, well, maybe this isn't the advisor for me because they're going to want to like fax me things or something like that.
Yeah.
Not to be ageist, but those are some of the things that do come up for people. So having that native sort of presence on social, on digital, and all these places, that takes an incredible amount of activity. But the nice thing is there are a lot of solutions that you can take advantage of, and not they don't even have to be paid solutions. It's just having a different sort of mindset around building a media personality around yourself as an advisor. And I think that's something that many of us are, if you're in an advisory field, if you're in something that has special expertise you don't expect and maybe are a little bit disillusioned by, but the quicker you can get over that, and this comes back to that decision, we can either wallow
Hmm.
in this or pick ourselves up out of it. Um, you'll get there with enough consistency.
Yeah. Awesome. And it seems like to all that, it's not even a lot relatively, right? It's not like you have to, like you said, 20% on the content, 80% on the distribution. And the distribution happens over time. So it's more so that consistency than anything else. That consistency, building your personality, just having that track record, whether it's once an hour or twice a week, it still builds that same consistency, that same factor. Obviously, the more you do it, the more eyeballs you'll get. But ultimately, again, it just comes down to that same thing.
That's right. That's right. But it comes down to a choice, right? How bad do you really want it? There's a really great
Hmm.
book about that. It's, um, long distance runners, where we're all capable of much, 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 much more than we're really, physically, or sorry, we're more physically capable of doing something than we mentally kind of allow ourselves to think. And so I think the first thing is, hey, what do I get to think about myself if I invest in this and it doesn't pay off right away, right?
Hmm.
Um, there's a I read this great piece of wisdom. It's like it takes what it takes, right? And I
Yeah.
think any financial advisor can kind of deals with this with clients all the time, which is, okay, well, when am I going to get a good return or things like that? And advisors have all kinds of different answers for it. It might be, well, here's how I look at it from a very quantitative viewpoint. Well, here's how I look at it. We invest and we just hold, right? If you look at
Hmm.
history, such and such has happened for the last, 100 years. And I mean, there's a lot of infighting within advisory circles about what's actually accurate and precise, but what is the client left to believe and trust? It's
Hmm.
very hard to decide, well, who do I actually trust? Because I don't know until I actually stick my money in and into the market and have you do some things with it.
Yeah.
That's the only way I'm really gonna know.
Yeah. Yeah. And like you said, they all have access to the same stuff, right? So it's like, whose beliefs do you share the most? Like to your point earlier about building that content, building that authority based on your beliefs. whose beliefs do you align with more so as seems to be more so the answer than again, everyone has the same stuff, right?
That's
We
right.
all
That's right.
live in the
Look,
same
there
country with the same markets.
by now I'm sure there are about 350,000 CFPs in America right
Mm,
now. You gotta find a way to differentiate yourself. And that
hmm
doesn't just mean picking a niche and going with it. It also means doing the behaviors that 99% of those advisors are not doing. And one of them is creating content. Only 1% of people on LinkedIn actually create content. That
hmm
is a compelling um, that's a compelling data point to take advantage of. Or I could say, well, I can hide in that 99% and hope something happens, which I'm sure it
Yeah,
does. But um, if we want that to pay off on average, we gotta act on it.
awesome. Yeah, Andrew, again, I really appreciate your insights here today. Is there anything else you want to kind of set us off with when it comes to you, Poseidon, where you're going, any advice you have for maybe advisors who are looking to grow their business or, people who are in technology trying to see how they can, build that foundation so they can scale, lean and mean, kind of like you guys are at Poseidon.
Yeah, yeah. Also, I appreciate that. Well, first of all, follow me on LinkedIn. I give a lot of tips and tricks out for free, and I think that gets a lot of people inspired to want to create content and want to share themselves authentically so that clients will authentically want to join your practice. So that's the first thing. Second thing is you can check us out on the web, useposeidon.com. But thirdly, again, I mentioned that, we're trying to build a company with a small team, and that means that relationships are really important to us. Just like the folks listening to this podcast or folks viewing this on YouTube, is when you scale your relationships, it dilutes over time, and we just don't want that to happen. So come see us at RIA Edge. We're going to be there. We go to Future Proof every year. And I think it really does come down to that when when you can work well together with folks who can help you with either growth or compliance or things of that nature. I think the average firm is valuing that much, 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 much more than pedigree or stated
Mhm.
results and things of that nature. I think the industry is getting smart to um, a lot of what media agencies have figured out in terms of getting contracts signed. So we like to start there, and I encourage everyone here to check us out. Come say hi, and give us a DM. We read every single one.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate that, Andrew. I'm going to end the recording here again.
Yeah, right
This
on.
is episode 4 of the Executive Edge. We will see you guys on the other side.